The desperate playth crystal spires of ethereal prime hummed with a frequency that spoke of despair. Ambassador Zara Vex stood before the great viewing portal, her translucent form flickering between shades of deep blue and silver as she watched. Another world die. The planet Harmony 7, once home to 3 billion peaceful Melodians, now pulsed with an ugly crimson glow. The Void Swarm had taken it. Behind her, the emergency council of the Serenity Coalition gathered in their floating meditation chambers. Representatives from 12 different species, all united by their commitment to peace and intellectual advancement, now faced their greatest crisis. For 800 cycles, the Coalition had been the beacon of civilization in this sector of the galaxy. They had ended wars, mediated conflicts, and shared technology that had lifted dozens of species into enlightenment. Council Prime Kess emerged from his aquatic chamber, his massive form moving with the grace of ocean currents. The Aquarian leader's normally gentle eyes now showed the strain of watching his peaceful universe crumble. Water droplets fell from his gill slits as he spoke, each word carefully measured. The reports from Harmony 7 confirm our worst fears. Kess announced, his voice carrying the weight of oceanic depths. The Void Swarm has successfully converted the entire planetary population. 15 billion organisms now serve the hive mind. Dr. Finn Orbit, the brilliant Celestian researcher, ruffled his golden feathers in distress. His species had evolved from avian ancestors, and despite millennia of advancement, they still displayed their emotions through ancient biological responses. The conversion process is accelerating, he reported, his melodic voice cracking with emotion. What once took the swarm 30 cycles to complete now happens in 15. They're learning, adapting, becoming more efficient. Zara turned from the viewport, her crystalline features hardening with resolve. Show us the tactical analysis again. The chamber's central display activated, revealing a 3-dimensional map of their sector. Red zones marked the swarm's conquests, spreading like a virus through space. The pattern was always the same. The swarm would arrive with their biomechanical ships, release spores into a planet's atmosphere, and within days the entire population would be converted into extensions of the hive mind. Worse still, the converted beings retained their intelligence and technical knowledge, making the swarm stronger with each victory. 27 worlds in 8 cycles, Dr. Orbit continued, his head tilted in the way his species showed deep concentration. If the pattern holds, they'll reach the core worlds within 40 cycles. The outer territories have perhaps 20. The mathematical precision of their doom hung in the air like a funeral shroud. The Coalition's response had been everything their nature dictated: diplomatic, measured, and completely ineffective. They had tried communication, but the swarm didn't negotiate. They had attempted economic sanctions, but the swarm didn't trade. They had even considered military action, but 800 cycles of peace had left them with defensive fleets designed for rescue operations and scientific surveys. There must be something we haven't considered, Zara said, though her voice lacked conviction. Some approach we've overlooked. Council Prime Kess's massive form shifted, causing small waves in his chamber. We have consulted every database, contacted every ally, explored every option our combined knowledge suggests. The Void Swarm is simply beyond our experience. We have evolved beyond the need for violence, but that evolution has left us defenseless against those who have not. The truth was stark and undeniable. The Coalition species had achieved their advanced state by abandoning the primitive drives that had once made them dangerous. Aggression had been bred out of their gene pools. Competitiveness had been replaced by cooperation, and the very concept of taking life was so alien to them that their weapons were designed to incapacitate rather than kill. Against most threats, this had been sufficient. Against the Void Swarm, it was suicide. What about the Deep Scan project? Dr. Orbit suggested suddenly, his crest feathers rising with excitement. We've been mapping uncharted systems for 50 cycles. Perhaps there are other species out there, ones that might understand conflict better than we do. Zara felt a flutter of hope, though she tried to suppress it. Show us what you found. The display shifted to show the galactic rim, where automated probes had been conducting surveys of primitive systems. Most contained only simple life forms or early civilizations that had barely mastered fire. But one system stood out. A yellow star with 9 planets, the third of which teemed with complex life and artificial signals. System designation Terra Prime. Dr. Orbit explained, his excitement growing. The third planet, which the inhabitants call Earth, shows signs of advanced civilization. They've achieved spaceflight, nuclear technology, and sophisticated communication networks. Council Prime Kess leaned forward in his chamber, causing small tsunamis. What makes them different from other primitive species we've encountered? Dr. Orbit's feathers darkened to a deep copper color, a sign of unease among his people. Their planet is what our classification system calls a death world. Extreme weather patterns, geological instability, and an ecosystem based on predation rather than cooperation. Most disturbing of all, the species that achieved dominance did so through constant warfare with each other. The chamber fell silent. The concept of intraspecies warfare was almost incomprehensible to the coalition races. It was like discovering a species that had achieved flight by throwing themselves off cliffs. They fight among themselves? Zara asked, struggling to understand the implications. Constantly, Dr. Orbit confirmed. Our long-range scans have detected evidence of thousands of conflicts throughout their recorded history. They've developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, strategies for combat in every conceivable environment, and military organizations that exist solely to wage war. The moral implications were staggering. These humans, as their species called themselves, were everything the coalition had evolved beyond. They were violent, aggressive, and apparently incapable of lasting peace. By every measure of civilization the coalition used, they were barbarians, but they were also exactly what the coalition needed. Their violence is directed at each other? Council Prime Kess asked carefully. Primarily, yes. Though they've also shown remarkable creativity in dealing with threats from their environment. Their planet regularly tries to kill them through natural disasters, hostile wildlife, and diseases. Yet they've not only survived, but thrived. They've turned their entire world into a fortress against entropy itself. Zara closed her eyes and felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Everything in her nature recoiled from what she was considering. The coalition had spent millennia teaching the galaxy that violence was never the answer, that intelligence and compassion could solve any problem. Now she was contemplating asking the most violent species they'd ever encountered to save them. But as she opened her eyes and saw another world flickering to red on the tactical display, she realized they had no choice. What do we know about their psychology? She asked quietly. Asterisk. Dr. Orbit consulted his data, complex and contradictory. They're capable of incredible cruelty, but also profound compassion. They fight wars, but also risk their lives to save strangers. They destroy their environment, but also create art of stunning beauty. Most intriguingly, they seem to have a concept they call heroism, where individuals sacrifice themselves for the good of others. Could they be trusted? Council Prime Kess rumbled. Unknown. But their entertainment media frequently features stories about protectors defending innocents from monsters. They might be violent, but they appear to have moral codes that govern that violence. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members argued that it was better to face extinction with dignity than to compromise their principles. Others wondered if these humans might pose a greater threat than the Void Swarm. But as reports continued to arrive from the front lines, as more worlds fell to the Crimson Tide, the choice became clear. They were dying. Their civilization, their culture, their very existence was being consumed by an enemy they couldn't understand and couldn't fight. If savage allies were their only hope, then savage allies they would seek. The message took days to craft. How? Do you ask for help from a species you've never met? How do you explain concepts like honor and justice to beings who might not share your values? In the end, they decided on simplicity. They would present the facts, explain the threat, and hope that somewhere in the human concept of heroism was a willingness to help strangers. The transmission was broadcast on all human frequencies, translated into their major languages, repeated every hour for 3 full days. It spoke of an ancient evil consuming the galaxy, of peaceful worlds falling to darkness, of a desperate plea for help from any who had the strength to stand against the void. The response came faster than anyone expected. Message received and understood. Serenity Coalition. This is Admiral Patricia Morgan of the Earth Defense Force. We've analyzed your data and confirmed the threat. Assistance is en route. Provide coordinates for fleet rendezvous. Humanity stands ready. The message was brief, professional, and carried an undertone of confidence that both inspired and terrified the council members. There were no questions about payment, no demands for concessions, no lengthy negotiations about terms. Just a simple statement of intent from a species that apparently made decisions as quickly as they made war. Zara stared at the communication display, her crystalline form flickering between hope and fear. In 3 days, they would meet their potential saviors. The question that haunted her was whether they were about to be rescued or conquered. The humans were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk Earth's answer, the Earth Defense Force. Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates with the precision of a surgical strike. Admiral Patricia Morgan stood on the bridge of the EDF Indomitable, watching her tactical display as 37 ships assumed formation around the Coalition's sanctuary station. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering, built not for exploration or research, but for one purpose: to fight and win in the hostile environment of space. Impressive, muttered Commander Sarah Chun, Morgan's second in command, as she studied the alien station through the viewports. Looks like they built a city instead of a fortress. The Coalition's Sanctuary Prime was indeed beautiful. Crystalline spires twisted through space like frozen music, connected by bridges of pure energy that pulsed with soft, welcoming light. Gardens floated in transparent domes, and the entire structure radiated peace and harmony. It was also, from a military perspective, completely indefensible. Dr. Webb, what's your assessment? Morgan asked. Dr. Marcus Webb, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, looked up from his scanner readings. Remarkable architecture, Admiral. The energy efficiency alone suggests a level of technological advancement far beyond our own. But he paused, his expression troubled. But what, Doctor? No weapon signatures, minimal shielding, and what appears to be a complete absence of defensive positioning. It's as if they've never considered the possibility of attack. Captain Jake Iron Rodriguez, commander of the fleet's marine contingent, snorted with disbelief. You're telling me these people built a space station without so much as a point defense system? What do they do when pirates show up? I don't think they have pirates, Dr. Webb replied quietly. From what I can determine from their initial transmission, their entire civilization has evolved beyond the concept of predation. They're probably genuinely peaceful. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The crew of the Indomitable had grown up in a universe where every ship carried weapons, every station had defenses, and every contact with unknown species began with raised shields and powered weapons. The idea of a civilization so advanced yet so vulnerable was almost incomprehensible. "Admiral," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the station. Audio and visual. Put it through." The main display activated, revealing 3 alien figures standing in what appeared to be a reception chamber. A central figure was unlike anything in Earth's databases. A being of living crystal, it seemed to contain its own light source. To its left stood a massive aquatic creature in some kind of mobile water tank, while the right position was occupied by a golden feathered being that reminded the humans of ancient depictions of angels. "I am Ambassador Zara Vex of the Serenity Coalition." The crystal being spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that made the translator work overtime. "On behalf of 12 peaceful species, I welcome you to our space, and thank you for answering our call for help." Morgan stepped forward, her uniform crisp and her bearing unmistakably military. "Admiral Patricia Morgan, Earth Defense Force. We received your transmission and analyzed the threat data. The situation is worse than you indicated." The 3 aliens exchanged glances, their various forms of body language expressing surprise. They had expected formal greetings, diplomatic protocols, perhaps hours of ceremonial exchanges. The human's directness was jarring. "Worse?" asked the golden-feathered being, Dr. Finn Orbit. "How could it be worse?" Engineer Alex Novak, the fleet's weapons specialist, had been analyzing the Coalition's data during the journey. Now he stepped forward with his findings. "Your void swarm isn't just a hive mind," he explained, his Brooklyn accent cutting through the chamber's refined atmosphere. "It's a biological weapons system. The spores it releases don't just convert living beings. They rewrite their DNA to optimize them for specific functions. You're not just losing people. You're giving the enemy custom-built soldiers who think like you do." "It explains why they're getting better at beating you," Morgan said bluntly. "Every world they take gives them new knowledge, new strategies, new biological templates to work with. By now, they probably know everything you know about warfare." "Which isn't much," Captain Rodriguez added, though not unkindly. "No offense, but your military doctrine reads like a philosophy textbook. Rules of engagement that prioritize enemy welfare, weapon systems designed to incapacitate rather than eliminate, and strategic thinking that assumes your opponent shares your moral framework." Ambassador Zara's crystalline form flickered with distress. "But surely there must be standards, even in warfare, rules that govern how civilized beings conduct themselves." "There are," Morgan replied, "but they only work when both sides agree to follow them. Your enemy doesn't. They're not civilized, they're not reasonable, and they don't care about your rules. They're a biological weapon system with one function: consume and reproduce." Dr. Webb had been quietly analyzing the biometric data from the alien transmission. Now he looked up with an expression of growing understanding. "Admiral, I don't think these species are physically capable of the kind of warfare needed to stop this threat." "Explain." "Look at their stress responses. When we mentioned genetic restructuring in biological weapons, their vital signs showed patterns consistent with severe psychological trauma. It's not just that they choose not to be violent. I think violence is literally alien to their neurology. They've evolved beyond the fight or flight response that drives human survival. Behavior. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. These aliens weren't just peaceful by choice. They were peaceful by nature. Asking them to fight the void swarm would be like asking humans to grow wings and fly. That's why they called. U.S., Morgan realized. They can't do this themselves. Not won't. Can't. Ambassador Zara's form had grown dimmer, her inner light fluctuating with what humans would recognize as despair. "We had hoped. Perhaps with your guidance, we could learn to defend ourselves." Morgan felt a strange emotion stirring in her chest. She had expected to find advanced aliens who needed military assistance. Instead, She had found something far more precious and fragile: true innocence in a hostile universe. These beings had achieved something humanity had dreamed of for millennia: a civilization without war, without hatred, without the constant struggle for dominance that had defined human history. And now they were about to be wiped out by something they couldn't even comprehend, let alone fight. "You don't need to learn," Morgan said firmly. "That's what we're here for." Over the next several hours, the human fleet began what could only be described as organized chaos. While the Coalition representatives watched in fascination and horror, the Earth Defense Force demonstrated why their species had survived on a death world. Engineer Novak's teams swarmed over the station's defensive systems, installing human weapons and shield generators with the efficiency of a construction crew. Captain Rodriguez's Marines conducted boarding drills that turned the station's peaceful corridors into tactical environments. Dr. Webb began analyzing captured void swarm specimens with a thoroughness that made the Coalition scientists queasy. But it was Admiral Morgan's strategic briefing that truly opened the aliens' eyes to how humans thought about warfare. "The swarm's strength is also its weakness," she explained, standing before a tactical display that showed the enemy's advance patterns. "They're predictable because they're optimized. They follow the most efficient path because their hive mind can't conceive of inefficiency." "How is predictability a weakness?" asked Dr. Orbit. Captain Rodriguez grinned, an expression that his species used to display aggression, but that had evolved into something more complex. "Because humans are masters of chaos. We don't do efficient, we do crazy." The plan that emerged over the following days would have been impossible for any coalition species to conceive, let alone execute. It involved deliberate exposure to void swarm spores, the use of human psychological warfare techniques, and a level of acceptable casualties that made the alien observers physically ill. But it also showed them something they had never seen before: the way humans could take hopeless situations and find victory through sheer, bloody-minded refusal to give up. The counterattack began with what humans called Trojan horse strategy. A coalition vessel, apparently fleeing in panic, was allowed to be captured by the void swarm. But this ship carried a special cargo: human volunteers who had been modified, with nanotechnology that made them appear to be converted while remaining fully human. Dr. Webb had spent sleepless nights developing the deception, creating false biological signatures that would fool the swarm sensors while leaving the volunteers minds intact. It was the kind of sophisticated biological warfare that the Coalition couldn't have imagined, let alone implemented. "This is madness," Ambassador Zara had protested when the plan was revealed. "You're asking your people to deliberately expose themselves to the most dangerous organism in the galaxy." "We're asking for volunteers," Morgan corrected, "and we got them." Every Marine in the fleet stepped forward. The volunteers, led by Captain Rodriguez himself, allowed themselves to be taken aboard the swarm's primary processing ship. To the hive mind, they appeared to be another batch of converts, ready to be analyzed and optimized. What the swarm got instead was a squad of human Marines in the heart of their operation. The chaos that followed was everything Admiral Morgan had promised. The Marines didn't fight like any converted species the swarm had encountered. They used tactics that were simultaneously brilliant and insane, equipment that violated every principle of efficient design, and a level of violence that the hive mind simply couldn't process. But the real masterstroke came when Dr. Webb activated the second phase of his plan. The nanotechnology in the volunteer systems didn't just hide their humanity from the swarm sensors. It also carried a virus of his own design, one that attacked the swarm's conversion process itself. Within hours, every converted being in the swarm's fleet began to remember who they had been before conversion. A hive mind built on the assumption of complete control found itself trying to manage billions of individual consciousnesses that were suddenly angry, confused, and very much aware of what had been done to them. The swarm's fleet began to tear itself apart as converted beings fought to break free from the hive mind's control. Some succeeded, others didn't, but the effect was catastrophic for the swarm's coordination. "It's working," Dr. Orbit announced. His voice filled with wonder as he watched the tactical display. "Their formation is collapsing. Ships are breaking off from the main fleet." "That's not retreat," Morgan said grimly. "That's confusion. Now we finish it." The Earth Defense Force fleet moved with the precision of a pack of wolves. Each ship knew its role. Each crew understood that victory meant not just defeating the enemy, but ensuring they could never recover. Human weapons, designed for maximum lethality rather than minimal casualties, tore through the swarm's disorganized forces. But it was the rescue operations that truly amazed the coalition observers. Even as they fought, human crews were launching operations to recover the freed converts, to evacuate populations from infected worlds, to save as many lives as possible while simultaneously destroying their enemies. How did they do it? Council Prime Kess wondered aloud as he watched human rescue shuttles racing through a battlefield to evacuate coalition civilians. How do they balance such violence with such compassion? "Because they're human, Ambassador." Zara replied, her understanding growing with each passing hour. "They don't see it as a balance. They see protection of innocence and destruction of threats as the same thing." The battle lasted for days, ranging across multiple star systems as the human fleet hunted down every swarm vessel and processing facility they could find. It was methodical, thorough, and absolutely ruthless. When it was over, the Void Swarm had been reduced from a galactic threat to scattered remnants that would take centuries to recover, if they ever could. But the humans weren't finished. "We need to make sure this never happens again," Admiral Morgan explained to the Coalition Council as her ships prepared to depart. "The swarm will try to rebuild, and when they do, they'll be smarter about it." What followed was a series of changes that transformed the Serenity Coalition from a collection of peaceful species into something new, a civilization that could defend its peace through strength. Human military advisors remained to train coalition defense forces. Human engineers helped design weapons that could be used by species whose nature prevented them from taking life directly. Human strategists developed doctrines that allowed peaceful beings to fight when necessary without compromising their core values. Most importantly, humanity established a permanent presence in coalition space. The Earth Defense Force's Third Fleet took up residence at a new station called Haven's Gate, serving as both protector and reminder that in a hostile universe, sometimes the gentle needed guardians who were anything but. The day before Admiral Morgan's departure, Ambassador Zara stood once again before the great viewport of Sanctuary Prime. But now she was not alone. Captain Rodriguez, who had volunteered to remain as military liaison, stood beside her. "We prayed for heroes," Zara said quietly. "We expected beings of light and virtue to descend from the heavens and save us through the power of righteousness." Rodriguez chuckled, a sound that had once frightened the coalition representatives, but now seemed oddly comforting. "Heroes are overrated. You got something better." "What's that?" "You got humans. We're not heroes, we're survivors. And now, so are you." As the ships of the Earth Defense Force prepared to jump to hyperspace, their mission complete, the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes salvation doesn't come from those who have transcended violence, but from those who have mastered it in service of something greater than themselves. The humans had given the coalition more than victory over the Void Swarm. They had given them a future where peace could exist because it was protected by those willing to fight for it. In the end, the Gentle had indeed called for warriors, and Earth had answered with the one thing the galaxy needed most: humans being human.